Alright guys, welcome to RCMojo. Today we have something of a first. RCMojo's first product. Actually, these are just the PCBs. A nice neat 5x5 centimeters. They should fit somewhere on most models. On the left are the 4 input channels, on the right are the 8 outputs, and on the bottom are the mode selects. Now, looking at the bare board isn't too much fun, so I'll pop some video up of me populating one. All done by hand at a slightly awkward angle, so I don't get in the way of the camera. I've stuck a watch in frame so you can see how long it takes. Right then, I call it RC Lights Truck B, or at least that's the file name on the design files. It really could do with a better name. Ideas are all welcome. It came about because a few years ago I wanted to be able to control lots of lights with a basic car radio, steering, throttle and the usual 2-position channel 3. I came up with a system I've been using for several installs, and I regularly get asked where they can be bought. Now, my old boards were all handmade. It would take a day or so to build and test, not something I could really do and sell for a decent price. There were other things too. Each of the boards was designed for one vehicle. Put it in another and the light setup wouldn't be right. Not good. So, fast forward to the end of October this year, 2014, and I started to write some specs out for a controller that will be usable with a simple 2-channel radio, right up to a highly programmable 8-channel. Have 3 different brake, tail and indicator modes, and use components I can put on a board fairly quickly. And talking of fairly quickly, there we are, done. Roughly 27 minutes. Not too bad, I think. But there's a couple of other bits to add. There's the 2 mode select jumpers, in mode and out mode, the 4 servo leads that go to the receiver, and lastly a connector for the output header, so you've got something to solder to if you haven't got anything else. Rinse and repeat another 8 times, and we have a set of boards ready for some firmware. Each board needs to be connected to the programmer and computer. The upload button gets pressed, then the long wait. Yeah. Yep, okay. Right. And there's the red light, which means the processor is alive and running. Nice. Well, that's the abridged version of how they're made. I think it's time we look at what they can actually do. There's a fair amount to this, so hang in there. We'll go from the most basic up to the extreme end, fitting one of the boards to the Tamiya high lift. Okay, gonna start with the old Ansman transmitter, as it's got 3 channels with a 2-position switch. Pretty much the most common setup. To show what the controller does with just 2 channels, I'm going to connect steering to input 1 and the throttle to input 2. Nothing else. We're going to need some LEDs to see what's going on, so here's my super fancy test rig, featuring tombstoned 0805 resistors and some blue tack. Only 1 LED per channel here, but the board will drive many. More on that later though. We're going to need some power, normally provided by your ESC, but for this test I'm going to use a 4-cell receiver pack. Results will be the same. Going to plug in the receiver first. Normally not a good idea, but it will demonstrate the power up warning on the controller. The red LED is solidly lit, which means it can't see any signals, which makes sense since the transmitter's not turned on. So we power it on, and the green LED starts blinking rapidly. This is it finding the center point of the controls. Once it's happy, the red light starts blinking. Now the controller wants to know which way's forward. A quick pull of the trigger, the green LED lights solid, and it's armed. Running in basic mode, all the functions are running. If I pull the trigger, the lights dim to tail light brightness, and the reverse light comes on in reverse. The steering, when moved from the center, activates the indicators. So far pretty typical of a basic LED controller. This is where the fun starts. I'm going to connect input 3 to the aux channel on the radio and select the 2 or 3 position mode on the in jumper. Now, with the aux switch on the transmitter, we can turn the main lights on and off. With a 3-position switch, the middle position has dipped headlights and aux 1 and 2 are off. Well, that's a bit better, but we still want more control. Going to change the in mode to classic. When the green LED is on and the red LED is flashing, we can do some magic. If the steering gets a tweak left or right, I can increment or decrement the setting. I can choose from 5 presets. All off, basic functions, indicators, brakes, tail. Then we can go from dipped headlights, full beam, then aux 1 and aux 2. When you've got the right preset, flip the aux switch and the steering now operates the indicators. Easy to use and does the job. There's another input mode to look at, but first let's have a look at the output modes. We've been using the world mode so far, where the indicators are separate amber front and back, and the brake lights and tail lights share an LED. But that's not the case with all vehicles. If I change to world alternative, the left tail brake LED is now just a tail light, and the right tail brake is now just the brakes. Useful when you want them separate. The third mode is USA mode. This is like the standard world mode, except the tail lights blink with the indicators. Not something I've seen too often, or at all come to think of it on an RC light controller. Back to the inputs now, and the increment-decrement mode. This requires a transmitter with more than just the basics. A modified GT3B works a treat, and I'm sure there are others too. With this mode, we don't need to use the steering to change the lights anymore. Using one of the rockers, if I click one way, we go to the next preset, and if I go the other way, it goes to the previous. The steering still, of course, does the indicators. But with a radio that has a lot of channels, there's a little trick we can do. If I move input 1, normally the steering, to channel 5 on the receiver, and of course have the transmitter programmed correctly, I now have full control over the presets with the bottom rocker, and now I can control the indicators completely independently from the steering. This is really the biggie. No more indicating on every turn, which does after all look pretty daft. And one of the main reasons people disconnect or never fit them. Well, here's the answer. So there we go. That's what's available on the board, except it isn't. There's that 6-pin header called Expand just sitting there. I've not got anything ready to sell that uses it yet, but I have my debug rig. The connector streams serial data out, which we can use with the slave device. If I connect it all up and turn it all on, we can see on the screen all the function states on the controller. If I change the preset, you can see the display change with the LEDs. The button on the controller also sends its state, and here's the fun one. If I toggle channel 4, yeah, there's all sorts of things that we could add and be controlled with this system. I'm just not entirely sure what as of yet. Okay, we looked at the board, but to really get an idea of what it's all about, you really need to fit it to something. I'm going to use the F350 for this, mainly because I've already installed the LEDs. The important thing here is this controller is not compatible with the Tamiya LED strings. It will do damage to them. Each LED needs its own resistor, but you can parallel up 10 or 12 per channel quite happily. Whereas the usual controllers limit you to, well, 2. Anyway, the wiring of the LED is pretty much as the video we made a while ago on LED basics. I'll pop a link in the description. At the moment I've got a single channel on-off controller fitted, so I'll need to remove that. The truck has a 6-channel radio, and we're going to be using all of them on this setup. Channel 1 will be the steering. Channel 2 is the throttle. It runs from the radio to the controller, then off to the ESC. Channel 3 is the 3-speed shift servo. 4 goes to input 4, and we'll be using that for a horn. 5 is the increment-decrement for the presets, and channel 6 will be doing the indicators. Going to stick the controller in with some good old servo tape on the gearbox. No need to do anything fancy unless it needs to be waterproof. Then a bit of conformal coating might be a good idea. First, since they're there, I'm going to connect up the tail lights. There's no reverse lights on this model, as I kind of painted all of the lenses red. Yeah, they need to plug into the left and right tail channels, and a quick test. Yep, looks good to me. Using the steering trim buttons for the indicators. Now for the cab, only have the headlights and 2 indicators to connect. I have some ideas for the aux channels, but more on that when I get to it. Okay, time for a power up. And there we have it, all working. Dips, high beam, indicators. Of course, it's in USA mode, so the brake lights flash for the blinkers. Which reminds me, there's another trick it can do. if your radio doesn't have a failsafe and the servo signals stop when the transmitter gets turned off before the model, the controller will turn on the hazard lights. No more forgetting to turn it off. That's about it for the hardware. Just one thing remains: the price. I'll have 8 boards available. They'll come with the servo leads and the 2x8 connector, all for 40 quid, which is near enough $62 US. There will be some shipping on top of that, but the boards don't weigh a lot, so that should be quite acceptable. There's also the LEDs, resistors and wire. For now you'll have to source your own, but I hope to be able to supply all that too. Perhaps even make up some plug and play kits. I'll put up an announcement video when the 8 are available, hopefully during this next week. Should be enough time to get them out in time for Christmas. Well then, as always, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please do hit that like button. It's always greatly appreciated. And of course, if you're not already, why not subscribe? After all, it's free. Bye guys.